Well, I think I'll start with the welcome, if that's okay with all of the presenters. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claire Fincham. I'm from SAPEX. It's great to see you all here this fine December afternoon, quite rainy and stormy in Joburg, but much needed for the farmers and our gardens. Thanks for the really great response that we've had to this event, and I'd like to start off by saying thank you to our sponsors, Interroll, RAM, and Rogue Chromatics South Africa. We're very grateful to you for your support and for supporting the association. Please, this is an interactive panel discussion. Please don't sit back and listen. We really encourage your participation. We'd love to hear your views after each of the after the speakers have given their points of view. We have 3 speakers this afternoon, and they're each going to be presenting for about between 7 and 10 minutes or so, and they'll follow on from each other, and then afterwards we're going to open it up for discussion. So please feel free to interact, but all the way through you're welcome to put your comments and suggestions and questions in the chat. And we will, I will be monitoring the chat along with Cindy, and some of the speakers may ask for some polls or some of your views, so don't be shy and pop them in the chat. You can also raise your hand. I'll be keeping an eye out to see who's raised their hands, and you're welcome to put your camera on or off and ask questions physically. So thanks very much. I'd like to just thank our speakers quickly and introduce them to you. They are very well known in the South African supply chain space, but I think I will formally introduce them. And ladies first, Karen Pretorius. She is a SAPEX education provider. She has a long list of letters behind her name. She's very well educated in this space, and she's the CEO of KPI Cubed, which is a niche consulting company specializing in change management, supply chain, talent management functions related to FMCG, retail, manufacturing, and third-party logistics. KPI have recently completed a change management project in the Fashini Group and Jet warehousing facility in Durban. They did that all through COVID last year, and it was quite a challenge, but a successful project. Then we move on to Archie. Thank you, Archie, for your time. In 2018, Archie Vermeulen joined RAM as the managing director and part owner of RAM Supply Chain Solutions. Archie has an excess of 25 years supply chain and warehousing experience, most of which was gained while he served as executive head of logistics at both Vodacom and Cell C, totaling 25 years in the cell phone space. During his tenure at Vodacom and Cell C, he was instrumental in the design and setup and go live of the warehousing and logistics operations, as well as ensuring the people, processes, and systems required were delivered to the SLAs set for external as well as internal customers. Finally, and last but certainly not least, and the chair of this afternoon is Martin Bailey from Industrial Logistics Systems. The company has over 40 years experience in logistics and has been responsible for the development of over 500 warehouse facilities. So as you can see from the profiles of our speakers, they're very well versed in this topic. And I'm going to hand over to Martin, who's going to start the discussions. And I look forward to your interaction, and thank you, everybody.
So I don't know, guys, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you and see your slides.
Great. Okay.
If you just want. Great.
Again, we're going to be talking about is automation viable in South Africa with 40% in unemployment. And I'm going to go through some things fairly fast. So is automation viable? Okay, first question. And I'll try and say yes. Just if we start the process, and South Africa, according to Bloomberg, but we're tracked, there's a whole lot of countries that Bloomberg don't track, but according to Bloomberg, who do track, we have the highest unemployment in the world. around about 35% official. It's probably less than that, although, if you take unofficial, probably 50, but a hell of a lot of people have got jobs but don't declare their jobs. They still want to get aid from government, so they work in the informal sector. So somewhere between 30 and 40% unemployment. And it's not just uneducated, it's also educated people. Clearly, these guys have been educated in the wrong areas, because if they were engineers or technicians or whatever, they wouldn't be marching. And as the guy said on these things here, you said education is the key. And the problem is which education. So we have real issues. And we really are sitting on a time bomb in terms of the unemployment in South Africa. Well, can we use automation to help? Can we fix it? Let me take a step back. Sort of until about 400 years ago, we lived in what we call certainly the Western world, maybe not the Muslim world, but the Western world lived in an age of faith, dark ages. Everything was about the devil, and if you didn't do things right, the devil came and got you, and there wasn't much in the way of personal development. Then we moved into the age of reason, age of enlightenment, sort of from 1700 to 2000. And sometimes there was lots of enlightenment, and we moved forward in the world. From the age of 2000, we're moving into, I guess, the age of digital intelligence. And that's going to probably be 100 years, because time has got compressed. So for the next 100, maybe 150 years, we're going to have some really interesting things happening in our world. We're living in the metaverse now, which is just in its embryo state. It's just started, and it's controlling our lives, and it's pretty addictive, and it'll control everything in our lives in another few years' time. So how does all this affect the supply chain? Well, hey, we started with dysfunctional supply chains in silos, and hey, most people we deal with are still in digital silos. Whoops, let me go back. And then we moved to functional excellence, getting bits. Then we integrated, then we had better collaboration, everything in life in the supply chain about collaboration. And now we've moved into an area of on-the-spot demand. We want it now. We want it before anything else happens. This is just a shot of a nice new warehouse in Belgium. And what do we see? More variety, faster response, smaller orders, clients who want more. When we say flatter world, you can buy Nike shoes anywhere in the world from here. And of course, greener, as you can see, the warehouse is trying to be a bit green. With increasing number of SKUs all over the place, changing customers, certainly brand new customers, think differently, want different things, and they want it now. So from a warehousing point of view, hey, just now ain't good enough. Now is when they want it. And then add the labor issues. This was a recent strike for NUMSA. And you can see we do have a few labor issues in South Africa. So we live in a pretty complex world in warehousing alone, never mind the supply chain. We live in a really complex environment. Let's take you into some hard automation in the warehouse. And we can talk about what's happening in warehousing. Well, if we look at automation, it's faster, it's more accurate, there's less theft, there's less mistakes, less space, but more capital investment. We do need some specialist skills. There's some initial risk, certainly more IT and less flexible. Sometimes you have no option, and Archie can talk about this. His warehouse wasn't quite as bad as this, but he was growing at a phenomenal rate. And when you start growing, you don't have an option. if you don't put in automation, you ain't going to solve this type of problem. You know, so what happens when you hit what we always call a technological wall? You just can't get the stuff out anymore. Then you have no option but maybe to put in a sortation system. You can automate. We've just finished a sortation system that's running at just over 12,000 parcels an hour on a system like this. So, you know, you hit a technological wall, you've got to automate. It can be flexible automation. This is doing the same thing using robots. So you don't have to have hard automation, a little more flexible. So you can automate most things. Most activities in the warehouse can be automated. We can do it without people, but not all. Here's one thing in the warehouse which nobody's yet fathomed out how to automate. I assume they would get there one day, but that's packaging. Packing is still extremely difficult unless everything you're packing is nice and symmetrical. It's one of the hardest things to automate. But as you get cleverer, we'll automate a bit more. From forklifts, there's an automated guided vehicle, and in the next 5 years, these things will be cheaper than forklifts. Forklift without a driver. To storage, easy to, that's probably the easiest thing in a warehouse to automate. Order picking can be quite difficult to automate fully. You can help the automation by bringing goods to man, but to automate it fully is quite tough. Checking, this recent one we've said 12,000 an hour. This thing scans the parcels, weighs the parcels, checks the dimensions, and gets it all to work. So you can do anything at this thing, and this sorter will take a complete set of golf clubs if you want. This is a stock taking vehicle that runs through your warehouse, looks for all your stock, and does a stock take continuously. You don't need any body stock taking. So one of the biggest advantages of automation allows a major reduction in footprint. Generally, we can get to a third of the footprint by automating. So that's always quite interesting. And the most important guy in your automated warehouse is this guy here. He's the guy who's going to maintain your automated warehouse. This whole helmet and thing on top this is from a company in Germany. And when this guy starts doing his maintenance, he connects to the guys in Germany and they help him. So he doesn't need to be that bright, but he does need to be reasonably capable. This is the guy that you're going to pay more than your MD. A bit of softer automation when we look at some IT stuff. And I just thought I'd put this graph up because it's quite an interesting one. If we look at the growth of artificial intelligence, that's where we are now. We're probably a little less intelligent than an ant, but we're growing, and we'll get to the point of intelligence of a bird. Then we get to a dumb human. Then we get to Einstein. And then we have some exponential growth, and who knows what will happen then. If you believe Elon Musk, mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. If you believe Jeff Bezos, he said here, don't have to worry, automation is great. Make your life much better, and we'll all prosper from artificial intelligence. In a warehouse, what can we use AI for? We still need to move boxes, so we ain't fathomed out how to use AI for that, but we can plan better, we can forecast better, we can schedule better, we can make maybe better decisions, we can control our equipment, we can do it faster, we can do it consistently and less error. So why automate your warehouse? Well, automation is getting friendlier. Every day it gets friendlier. It's more cost effective. It's getting more flexible. Today we can automate that you don't need hard conveyor all over the place. We can get better customer service. We can get increased throughput. We can reduce the footprint dramatically. But most of all, it makes you more competitive. So here's my thesis. More automation equals more competitive. More competitive equals more economic growth. More economic growth equals more employment. And therefore, I'm saying automation will give you more jobs. And you're going to say nonsense? Well, let me prove it. If you look at who's got the highest amount of automation in the world, it's South Korea, followed by Singapore. That's according to this International Federation of Robotics. South Korea, unemployment 3%. Singapore, unemployment 3%. Germany, who's number 3 in the row, far down the line, unemployment about 5 to 8%. Yeah, if you've got unemployment at 3%, it means those people don't want to work. So you can see the guys with the highest density of robotic workers have the least unemployment. Interesting. So without unemployment, you might end up outsourcing to those more competitive, and those more competitive are probably sitting in China, and therefore you won't have a business, and therefore you won't have any economic growth. There's a guy called Okan who developed a law, and he statistically proved that economic growth and unemployment are linked. I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to understand that, but he did it scientifically. So he said the same thing. And what I'm saying is the world isn't simple. Automation doesn't mean a loss of jobs. And if trying to stop progress in automation is almost impossible, you just cannot. Although there's a few things in life, I guess, you don't want to automate. And maybe the supply chain warehouse isn't going to change so much that we won't have to move boxes. We assume that we'll always move boxes, but we'll get devices, and all we'll need to do is have boxes of the raw materials that go in to make your life. And one day, I assume this is a staged one, I don't think they're there yet, but in Star Wars they have it, we'll be able to print our own food. That'll be nice. Anyhow, welcome to your new future, and that's sort of what I've got in my presentation, and I'm going to hand over to Archie, who's next.
Right, thanks, Martin. Yeah, that definitely gives some food for thought. So I just want to good afternoon to everybody as well. So just from my experience, and to go back to 1998, when I still had hair that was a lot darker than it is now, and at that time cell phones had just started in 94, so 95, 96. So we were very manual at Vodacom, and the growth in the cell phone market really took off when the prepaid system came along. If you recall, the whole thing started contracting. People who had contracts, you would get a cell phone. And then the prepaid came, so you could get your scratch cards, and then you could get your cell phone. And then it became very, very competitive, and between the networks, and obviously now you've got to have the phone, you can get the airtime, and so you had to get the phones out there. So at that time, we were very manual. I mean, automation was a pallet jack. That was automation. And in fact, we didn't even have the right size pallet jack. We had a narrow aisle. We were on Euro pallets, which generally at that time wasn't really known about. And you were really on the Imperial pallet. So you had an Imperial pallet jack, and you were trying to move the smaller pallet. So the decision was then taken is that from Shamil, who was the MD at the time, to say, guys, we can't do this. We've got to be competitive. We've got to get better at what we're doing. So we need to get some automation going. And the automation wasn't about jobs. The automation was about being competitive, about doing the right things right quicker. And so we then embarked on this automation thing. But you know, you've got to get the reason why you're automating. You've got to be clear on that, and very clear, because if you're not clear on that and you're automating because you want to reduce your labor force, I think you haven't given it a lot of thought, because if you don't automate, you're going to be left behind, because your competitors are doing things faster, better. So that's just the mantra of the business we're in. So what we did is we embarked on a journey. It took us 18 months to conceptualize. We put all our things together, decided how we wanted to do it, and then learned that we were not doing it correctly, went back to the drawing board, and did the things that one should do, that you read about in these magazines and in the books, and that, you know, you've got to do this, you've got to help there, you've got to try this, think about that, and you've got to include your staff. So we did all those things. So at our warehouse, we took the staff. There was nothing in Midrand. We showed them this is where the new warehouse is going to be, explained to them so that they already could understand the transport, you know, try to get around those type of things. We went 3 times as the guys were building and tried to explain and highlight and also spoke about automation, pick to light, scanning, inline weighing scales, all those type of things. So, and then it took a lot of time. We also spent a lot of time on the integration. Now, if you're going to get it doesn't matter how well automated you are. You saw the pic there that Martin showed, where the guys have got a conveyor belt, it's running around, but they're still doing the hand sorting. So, you know, you've got to get your integration right. So one is integrating your systems, and I think that's the part that you really got to get right, because the rest of the materials handling equipment, if I could put it that way, really does just make your life a little bit easier. So what happened is we put all this stuff together and we were ready to go. We went live on the 11th of February 2002, 7 o'clock in the morning, all go. By 7:30 it stopped. So there were a few lessons that we learned there. One is, if you're going to be doing this automation thing, you need to do it with your staff gradually, because not everybody understands automation. And you might think that, well, you know what, you're just putting totes onto a conveyor belt. So how tough is that? Well, when it doesn't go fast enough, what starts to happen is the staff start to push the totes on the conveyor belt. Now that doesn't work. So effectively what you're doing is you're breaking the automation. So that's just some little bit of basic type of things that you've got to do. The staff didn't, eventually we got the automation going and they started to understand. But the biggest problem we had is the things that we did in terms of integration. We thought that we checked a lot of the things. We'd worked on the things. We'd understood it. We double checked. We tested. When we switched on, it didn't work. And it took us 3 months to figure this out. Okay, now 3 months, it's not as if you've got 3 months and your business is standing. The business is on. The heart is pumping. You're disappointing your customers. You promised them this speedy warehouse, and you're really going to get your stock. You order today, get tomorrow. Well, what happened is you order today, you get it next week. So it really didn't work. So we had all the automation, but we didn't get the processes, the integration, all the things to fire together. Now, it's very difficult to do that, but I would suggest that you spend an extra bit of time on getting your integration and your processes together with your automation to get that to work. So when you automate, and what we learned was, you know, we automated some areas that really didn't need automation. You know, so as the story goes, you know, when you get better at a non-bottleneck, that's just an illusion. So, you know, look at where your bottlenecks are and then go and have a look. How, if you automate that, where does the bottleneck move to? So that, I believe, is one lesson that we learned very well. Definitely I learned with my staff. They learned a lot quicker than I did, because I also learned that I wasn't the best listener in the world. So you've got to back up your listening skills and understanding skills and listen. Because I also learned as time went on, it's called the iceberg of ignorance. So yeah, you know when you know. And when you're very clear on why you're automating, and you look at the jobs that are happening and what jobs you can take away, you know, I think there's a lot of jobs that will be lost because of automation. So, for example, there's a lot of people that don't want to offload trucks. That's just not what people are doing anymore. In the old days, if I can call it that, back in my day, you know, that was pretty okay, but it's not okay today. So I think those type of things is where automation is going to take jobs away. But is it really taking the jobs away? Because the people, you can train them, you can help them, you can show them, and you've got to take time to do that. And if you aren't doing it, well, where are you going to get these people from? These are just some of the learnings that we went through at Vodacom. So when I had the opportunity, and it really was an opportunity to do it all over again at Cell C, we changed it. We didn't do it the same way anymore because we'd learned a lot of things and we did it differently. So to get the warehouse up and running and the automation going, we did the conveyors, the pick to light. We did all that. That took us a lot less time than it did with Vodacom. And then obviously getting the staff trained up and showing them how to do it was a lot easier. And then the system, a lot of the system glitches had already been sorted out. And by that stage, we'd already learned that, you know, you've got a 6 million Rand warehouse management system. And if you're still running your reports on Excel, well, somewhere you've done something wrong. So it's also very important to have a warehouse management system. Now I understand, and there might be people on the call that are ardent fans of SAP and Oracle, and they are great systems. There's no question about that. They are fantastic systems if you're an accountant. In my experience, if you want a warehouse management system, then that's what you've got to go for, and then ensure that the finance guys get the information that they require. So I really don't believe that automation is going to, there will be jobs lost, but I think the jobs that are gained will be at a higher level. And I think that's where the party is going to get really interesting, because we've got to train, we've got to show, we've got to help, we've got to teach. And that's how I see it going. I'm very privileged at the moment. I'm going to be, all the things I'm talking about now, I'm going to have to put it into practice where I am now. So if you're going to automate your warehouse, I think be very clear. Be very, very clear on why you're automating and what you're automating. Because if you're not clear on that, you're automating for the wrong reasons, because you could be doing the wrong things a lot faster. And I'd just like to pass on to Karen. That's my story for now.
Thank you very much, Archie. That was really a good explanation of what you've done in the past. It sounds frustrating, and I now understand why you don't have hair. I'm sure that was challenging in everything that you've done. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Okay. My screen there. You see my screen?
Yeah.
100%, Karen.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so thanks again for the sponsors, everyone who's here with us today. So I thought I'd start this presentation quickly with what is automation all alike nowadays? It's in so many different places and we don't even see it. So Martin talked about AI. Here's a good example. So when I first started typing the slide, this is what happened, but I just pressed a button and next I was able to have a very more exciting slide that I could share with people without having to go through hours and hours of editing. That's the kind of AI that we have nowadays, the kind of automation that we have. So from my side, is automation viable in South Africa? The exam question being answered, yes, 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 most definitely yes. And why? Let's see. So typically when we think about automation, we either caught up in the Terminator cycle or that movie I, Robot with Will Smith, and we just think about robots building robots, but it's in so many more other places that AI and robotics and automation is here to help us as a population of the world to do better things. So if you're diabetic, you can prick your finger at home and get a reading instantly. That's a form of automation. There's a form of AI even built into those machines nowadays that can tell you if you're at risk. When you use the bank to withdraw money, and nowadays that's been replaced with online banking on your cell phone, on your app, you're using automation. But with all of these new systems, then some job was taken away or replaced by a machine of some kind, but some job was created to start making this happen. We now have courses in design thinking that never used to exist. We have got different kinds of developers and software engineers that never used to exist, and the scope is so much wider than what we used to have. Having said that, if we think about automation, Mitch Radcliffe is a journalist. He's one of the authors at Earth 911. A computer lets you make more mistakes faster than any other invention in human history, with the possible exception of handguns and tequila. I think a lot of people know more about tequila than handguns. But if you think about what happened with handguns, from being single-shot pistols to having revolvers, to having automatic pistols again, to now having submachine automatic pistols like the one that was used in the shooting in the US just yesterday, not all automation is always beneficial. And we have to be careful that combining these two, guns and tequila, don't just let us end up with Dias de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. So how we use the technology and the automation is quite important, and it sounds then in with what Archie said about why do you want to automate? What is the reason for it and what will it be used? And when we see that most automation is driven by some kind of computer systems, to err is human, to forgive beyond the scope of a computer. How many times have you forgotten to save? Nowadays, you've got Microsoft 365, it's saving so often that it's actually starting to get into the way. And we have to watch out that the errors that we make don't get blamed on the wrong people in your organization. Because that's easy to happen, that we continuously have shape shifting and blame shifting. I like the picture on the right hand side at the bottom. Why do robots like that need lights and windows? Doesn't make sense to me. So there the automation wasn't fully thought through. Factory of the future, a very old saying from Warren Bennis, who was seen as the father of modern leadership studies, the man and the dog. It says the factory of the future will be having only two employees, a man and a dog. The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to keep the man from touching the equipment. There's a link to a very short, nice little video that explains this. It's only 8 minutes, and it's easy and interesting to watch and to think, what will the factories really look like and what will the jobs be? We are still far away from robots building robots, but we are getting closer. If we then think about something that's very pertinent at the moment in South Africa, the Checker 6060 app, I think all of us on the school probably have either that or the Pick and Pay bottles, or there's now also Pick and Pay ASAP. In 2020, they created 800 new jobs through the 6060 program at Checkers. By 2021, the stats is from October this year, 2,870 new jobs at Checkers 6060, and 250 new jobs created by the ShopRite X Innovation Hub. The Innovation Hub didn't even exist a few years ago. So automation, AI, robotics, the fourth industrial revolution is leading to all of these new jobs. So with the 6060 app, it basically automated how you ordered, but they had to add resources to pick, resources to manage those pickers in the shop, resources to drive your parcel around, resources to manage those drivers, adding more resources for new supply chain activities that Checkers never used to have. Running motorbikes, running and developing apps, managing those apps, creating new kinds of totes for the motorbikes that's specific to them, the marketing and the design that goes with that, the procurement of all of these, the maintenance of the motorbikes and the machines and the scanners that they use for the apps in store, and even more than that. So it's quite interesting to see how a little bit of automation and innovation can create even more jobs. If we think about drones, most of us see a little boy standing flying his drone on the beach, but actually there are so many more different applications that can be used. Search and rescue, shot down, also like the machine that Martin showed in his slides. Different kinds of warehouse materials handling equipment for deliveries, for firefighting, for healthcare screening, for exploration, for filmmaking, and the list goes on. When I was at school, I certainly never thought about a career as a certified drone pilot. One of those things that are new, and it's taking over the world. If we then think about autonomous vehicles, what's happening in this space? So look at the headlines that you see on the internet when you start searching for autonomous vehicles. How will it transform the supply chain? What's the different levels of self-driving cars? There's even things going on TikTok. TikTok didn't exist a few years ago. Now it's being used not only as an entertainment, but as an education platform. And there's a lot of things happening in that space. And again, there are jobs now. People are being paid to do a job on TikTok to educate or entertain or edutain other people. Again, will the truck driver from today be replaced by a remote driver and monitoring? But if you look at the driver shortages in the USA, they are stealing drivers from the thousands here from South Africa and in Europe? Are we having driver shortages because we've got too much goods that need to be moved by road? Or are we not truly solving the right problem of where those goods should be produced and where they should be closer to their markets? We have to really think, like Martin also quoted Elon Musk, who's in favor of first principles. Let's solve the problem at its root through the right level of automation. And if we start implementing automation, is it easy? Probably not. Is it fast? Definitely not if we think about what Archie said. Is it cheap? Even more so, no. But is it better? Is it viable? And in the world that we live in with climate change and all of those things that are affecting all of us on a regular basis, is it sustainable? If you want to put in solar panels, you get solar energy, that's fantastic. If you have to use a lithium-powered battery to store that power, it's no longer such a sustainable or good idea. So we have to think about, is there enough resource, time and money to do this kind of automation implementation? Who needs to be trained on what? I saw in the comments, Jenny mentioned education, education, education. And then especially with automation, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop after you've put in the sortation system for a warehouse. It doesn't stop after you've gained a few drones. It doesn't stop with Checker 6060 after they now have fleets and fleets of motorcycle drivers. What is next after that? Because anything that needs to be automated needs to be maintained and improved and be looked after. And then why do people not like the change? So the three key reasons of people resisting these kinds of changes, especially in automation projects, whether it's a system like the sortation system, excuse me, happens when you work from home. I think that's part of the new reality. Most of the reasons are, I don't understand it, and that's the fault of the organization if they didn't prepare the people for the change. People must be able to understand the change and why it's necessary. Then people can be the people. I don't like the change. It doesn't suit me. I don't want to do it. It's going to affect me in some way. And the last one that people don't like change is that they say, I don't like you. I don't like you, Corin. You're the person that's delivering the message to me, and I don't like what you're saying with this message. And that one is a bigger block that we have in most cases. Like Archie mentioned the iceberg. It's often that we struggle with change because the people that have to change are getting a message from someone that they don't like. And why do we also struggle with the people? You've all probably heard about the FUD principle. It's used in marketing everywhere, especially insurance. In other places, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you think about what happened with COVID, they scared the living daylights out of us. They are reaping uncertainty and doubt from us. Around every single corner, we are not sure what to listen to, what to read, what to pay attention to. And this is exhausting for people, especially people in operations. Then what we get is vertical silos, and we started to move away from that. What we nowadays have a lot of is horizontal silos, interdepartmental silos. We still have sales and operations fighting against each other. Sales want to go out into the warehouse and pick the order immediately because they can't wait for the warehouse. Operations want to do it properly because the order has to be invoiced. How do you stop them from fighting with each other? Sales think they're more important. Operations say, but I move the box. Who's at the heart of your business? You have to manage this. And then we have a lot of horizontal silos, and I think it's becoming worse nowadays because we've got interlevel silos. So your middle management is always too busy managing things. They have to attend meeting after meeting, whether it's HR, or it's now performance development meeting, or the budget meeting. They just have to do meeting. The blue-collar workers that have to go through the change are too busy doing. They don't have time to get trained. They don't have time to attend the change management system because they must be busy moving boxes all day long. And then our senior management, those are the guys that are present at the kickoff, and they help us to decide on a project name, and we next see them on the project when we hand out the t-shirt. Because everyone is just too busy fighting fires, and we are ending up, especially in these COVID times, in a situation that we are happy with good enough. Things must get done, the stock must get out the warehouse, just do it. It's like Nike sponsoring the world, just do it. But we have moved away from being good and being great to just being good enough. And we all have to take a breath, especially with automation, to say, how do we become great when we do put in automation into our facilities, whatever that kind might be? Then on the people side, when they feel insecure, they feel powerless, they feel threatened, especially for their jobs. And it's our collective responsibility to then either retrain this kind of staff to have a new job, or to get them into the organization where they can add more value, also through education and training. So the company's responsibilities don't end with just putting in automation. You hired those people, you better train them up for the next round that is coming. And we saw this a lot in I think, especially people between probably the age of about 30 to 55. When you came into the workplace, you were trained on all kinds of technology things, left, right, and center. Then people that are now probably 25 to 35 years old, they had some kind of CAT training at school, computer-aided technology, and they learned that at school. But we also have this middle section of people who are hardly familiar with technology. You have a picker that's been a picker for 10 or 15 years, or forklift driver for 10 or 15 years. Yes, he may have a smartphone, but he has got no idea how to use Outlook or Excel. And we have to make sure that when we do give him the fancy report from the warehouse management system, that he's actually qualified to then not just use it, but interpret it. Edgar Allan Poe said that we have to analyze. Calculation is not analysis. And often in businesses, we are so busy collecting our stats, we calculate them, but we don't analyze to see what it truly means. Managing change versus preparing for change. Be careful that you're not moving too fast, that you prepare the staff, individuals, teams, and management. You upskill them or assume they have the skills. And then, we're all familiar with this in organization. Surprise, here's a new system. We all like good surprises. This is the one that we want. But what's happening with the world right now? This is our headline again. Christmas is at risk because supply chain disasters are only getting worse. Global shortages of containers. And yet we have got all of this automation in processes that we are not able to get the stock onto the shelves this year. When we search for information on the internet and you do an image search, a lot of the images come up with just processes and technology, but automation is much more than that. Something that's very important to us again as a world is the UN Global Compact, and especially if you look at principles number 3, 4, 5, and 6 from the labor side. Automation, AI, and robotics can help us to abolish child labor. It can help us to get rid of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. It's much more harder for a woman of childbearing age to be a truck driver than a man. It would be easier for her to be a remote driver or a drone operator. And if we focus on applying automation for the good, then we will also be creating more of the right kind of jobs. I think it was Archie that said people don't necessarily want to do the hard work anymore. So here we've got the robot pushing the ball, and it is outperforming our people pushing the blocks. So if we can get our designs right, our business process improvement and innovation right, and combine that with our automation, we will be able to improve. And when we improve, we can do more with this. We can improve and reduce the cost base. We can improve revenue and profit. And when we do that, we've got investments that we can put back in the business and that we can put back into our people so that we can create workforces that are better suited for what is going to happen. An investment in training and education then for your staff, especially in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is what needs to happen in organizations. You can't take a kid out of university or a blue-collar worker out of school and not continue to invest in their education. The newest acronym for this is actually STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and then mathematics, and bringing the artistic side, and that's also influencing things like AI into the world, and seeing how do we make the world a better way with the right type of education. We get back to the exam question. Is automation viable in South Africa with 40%? I would say yes, most definitely yes. Yeah, that's it from my side then. And then just again, if you want to reach out on any of these topics, you're welcome to chat to me about that. And one of the items in the presentation, I'm sure Claire will circulate this afterwards, is about the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology. As Claire mentioned, I've got a lot of letters behind my name. I like collecting them. I'm a closet case nerd. And I always like getting to the theory behind certain things. And this makes for some interesting reading, especially the social influence side, if we start looking at the acceptance of and use of technology in our world, in our businesses, and in our lives. And that's it from my side then. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. Guys, really time now to just grab some questions for us, comments. Archie and I have 120 years experience in putting automated systems in. So please fire them if anybody's looking at automation. Anybody doesn't like what we said, please shout out. Who's collecting? Claire, are you collecting all the questions?
Thanks, Martin. We have a couple of questions. Thank you to the three for that very enlightening presentations from all of you. I'll start at the top with John Jensen. I hope that's how you pronounce your surname, John. Does anyone have a rough order of magnitude estimate of the fully burdened cost of a typical South African warehouse worker? So I am somewhat familiar with the US. For example, Amazon is paying a minimum of $17 per hour, more in some municipalities with higher minimum wage laws, but that's with medical health insurance and paid off time. Depending on the company, maybe assume 25% on top of that. Do any of you have a ROM figure for South Africa?
Archie, this is you. You employ a whole herd of people. Look, you're on mute, Archie. Still on mute.
There we go. Yeah. Okay, so this is always an interesting topic because the warehouse is sort of on the back end, and you know, you just need people to move boxes around. Until the boxes don't move around, then it becomes a different problem. So generally, I think they're always trying to pay the guys the least. I have a view that you shouldn't be doing that. And of course, it becomes to affordability. But I mean, we have a minimum wage. I don't think the minimum wage is adequate if you're wanting to build and educate and train and show and teach. So, you know, it's a difficult one. I don't have a finite number, but I do believe if you're paying the guys a living wage, you know, what would a living wage be? So I don't have that number. I know what I'm paying my guys, and I believe that I could obviously be paying them more, but it's also business dependent. So it's a very difficult question to give you a finite number to. I'm not sidestepping the question, it's a difficult one.
So we work generally when we're doing feasibility studies, we'd work on 150 to 200 a year. 150,000 to 200,000, that is cost to company of a personnel. So that's sort of the order of magnitude. Clearly there's guys who pay minimum wage way below that, and there's a lot of guys in industry who pay double that. So as Archie says, it's quite variable, but that's sort of where we look at things, somewhere in that range.
Just to add to that, Martin, when I was doing a lot of activity-based costing projects previously, we did find that certain warehouses in different areas cost more labor-wise than in other areas. And the difference was between 20 to sometimes 50% that the same worker doing the same job in one warehouse in, for example, Cape Town could cost more than in Durban. And when we started investigating it, it was due to legacy issues of where staff had been working in the facility for a very long time, and you now had a picker who's been a picker for the last 20 years, who's had a cost of living increase for the last 20 years and who's completely priced outside of the market. When that kind of thing happens, I want to point it back to the company, because it's the company's job to make sure that people are educated and promoted within the company and to work with talent management, and that you don't have that situation that people become so overpaid that they actually can't leave in an organization. You have to create the jobs and the levels where people with experience can move into, so that you can employ newer people again to start helping with the youth unemployment problem as well. So companies have to be very careful about creating those opportunities and developing the people into the right areas.
Great. Claire, anything? Next one.
Next one, Louis. Thank you, Louis. We do understand the benefits of automation and so forth. However, given the current context of South Africa, which is an unequal society where prejudice has greatly impacted the level of education of the majority, do you think that automatic still represents to create jobs? I do believe automation creates a loss of jobs.
Yeah, well, you heard, I think, what both Archie and I and Warren said. We're not sure it does create a loss of jobs. There's certain cases if you automate for the sake of automating, as Archie said, that'll certainly, but if you do it so that your business can survive and prosper, then you're going to grow the business and you'll employ more people. And all the statistics shout that you're wrong. So if you look at it, and from a micro point of view, you're right. But if you look at it from a macro point of view, the science and the numbers say, no, you're wrong. That people who've automated become more competitive and employ more people. And countries that are more automated employ more people. So I'm not sure your statement is completely right, but there are cases where it's certainly right.
Great. Tim Marshall, what role does public policy play in ensuring that automation augments the current workforce instead of replacing it? Good question.
So public policy, I guess, tax incentives, they're quite good tax incentives in South Africa for capital expenditure. And you can write off automation reasonably fast. So that part of public policy is good. I'm not sure there is any other public policy that I know of. I think politicians are pretty scared to discuss automation at all. So I'm not sure. Don't know if you guys know of any public policy.
No. I think there's not a public policy on it, Martin, as far as I'm aware, but I think it's got to do with just being a good person. And, you know, good persons don't necessarily make good jobs. So and it doesn't, you know, if you're trying to do it to be a good person, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't necessarily end up being competitive. And I think that's where you've got to be circumspect about it. You've got to be, again, back to why are you automating? And if you have got somebody in your facility that has been with you for a long time and you haven't taken the time to upskill them, I think that could be a huge problem, because that's not an automation problem. That's a management problem.
Good point. We've got a few more questions here, Martin. I don't know who you want to read this one to. Would you advise that a technology strategy be put together first before trying to deploy any automation?
So, yeah, now you're getting into things that excite me greatly. Firstly, I'd like to see a business strategy. So a lot of companies you work for don't have any strategies, but assuming they have a business strategy, next they have a supply chain strategy. And then once you have a supply chain strategy, assuming they have that, then we can talk about execution. How are we going to execute that supply chain strategy? And from that will be the warehouse, the transport, the software, the hardware, and all of that. So hopefully they have a complete full depth of strategy, business, supply chain, and if you're in the warehousing business, a warehouse strategy. And if we can do it in that order, you're much likely to be more successful. So some companies have all that, some companies have none of that.
Just to add to that,
Carry on,
I can just add there. So one of the older theories is also, when we do these kinds of projects, what is the order that we do it in? People, process, technology, technology, process, people, process, technology, people. And you have to look then also, where does your strategy fit in with that? To see, can you start with the technology and what will flow from there? And in most cases, it is actually, we've got a specific process and we have to find the technology to make that work. Often we end up with specific technology that we try to beat into the right shape and size to fit the type of process that we want. And that's the wrong way around. And then we often end up with various kinds of systems, whether it is mechanical automation or system automation, that requires continuous investment and continuous babysitting, because we didn't start at the right end of the spectrum. Perhaps that's a good poll to ask at this point in time, is what do you think is more important when you do an automation project in your business? Is it the technology, is it the people, or is it the process? I would love to see some answers there. Maybe you can just pop it into the chat boxes there. People, process, or technology, what do you think should come first?
Okay, so while you're all doing that, Archie, did you want to add to that answer?
Yeah. So what I wanted to get into, Claire, was, you know, the automation is one thing, and it's designed to speed things up and get things quicker, do it faster, hopefully do it better if you've got all the integrations and systems working well. So and you look at and saying, well, look, is that viable with unemployment? One of the things that hasn't been automated at all, and it's a massive burning point, I believe, in our environment, is it's and we've all got it. I would say pretty much of a muchness, getting it good going out. Coming back in is another problem, and there's no automation. There's very little happening there, and that really is the wrap up of how well you did it going out. Is when it comes back, how quickly do you put it back into your system? How quickly does the customer at the end of the day get their credit, be that the end consumer or the company that you're dealing with? And I think that is so you need a higher level of staff thinking, a higher level of problem solving to do reverse logistics, and that's a problem.
I'm added to that in the e-commerce business, especially in clothing. Worldwide, it's not uncommon to have 22-23% returns. Now, when you're getting 20% back again that you put out, your return logistics actually is more complex than getting it out, far more complex. You know, you're getting back somebody's suit that he's got confetti in the pockets, and you get coming back clothes that have been worn once for a wedding and sent back again, and you know, and gee, as I said, I visited the e-commerce guys just before COVID, where we're running at 22% return. That's, yeah, as Archie says, that's far more difficult. So you fully automated picking systems, dispatch systems, and then hundreds of people sitting there trying to work out what to do with all these returns.
Okay. Corin, did you see in the chat? You've got a couple of people who have answered. Agree with process first before we move on to Delia's question and Luke's questions. So any comments on the answers?
I think that speaks to the heart of this. Look at the process. Does the process justify any form of automation? What will the benefits be that it will bring? And how can you implement it? Then do you have the right people to actually execute those processes with or without the new technology? And then train them up along with the technology that you implement to create the outputs that
Karen, before process, before any of those is a strategy.
Yeah.
What on earth are you trying to do? What is your business objective? How are you trying to grow it? What's your market you're going to service? What product range are you going to put in? Then the processes are pretty easy. When you've got a clear business, hey, I'm going to grow this business by 58%. We're going to increase the SKU range by 29%. You then know exactly where you're going. The worst ones are the ones that have no clue what their business is going to look like in 5 or 10 years' time. Then whatever you build is not going to work very well.
And like Simon Sinek says, start with why. Why do you want to do this? What's the reason for it? And as you said, rightly, it's the strategies that should drive it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Okay, any more? We've got another 10, 15 minutes for those who want to hang on.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for staying on. We have a couple of more questions. Delilah, what has been your experience in retraining or reskilling staff when automating? For example, typical service workers used to offloading trucks, and how easy was it for them to take on more complex roles? And any success stories?
Karen and I probably will disagree here. In my experience, the biggest problem is retraining executives, not staff. The executives are the ones that need a total adjustment in culture. The staff adjust pretty well. 90% of our staff, they've got smartphones, they're easy, you educate them quickly, they learn quickly, they adapt quickly. It's the executives that have the biggest issue in adapting. Anyhow, that's my opinion. We've done over 100 automated systems, and I would say half of them we have that problem.
So from that, Martin, I think just to put it very, very simply, the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle. That's just the way it is. The guys at the top, they don't believe they should change anything, but I don't know when last they offloaded a truck. So that's the part that becomes very difficult. What I found in my experience is that when you show a little bit of interest, you show a little bit of love, and it doesn't cost a huge amount of money for a retraining, because a lot of people just see it that I'm stuck in this job for the rest of my life. So if you start showing a little bit that there is some light in the tunnel, it's amazing what happens to, and not to everybody, but the majority of the people. And I think you're right, Martin.
Would agree. Yeah, so we had this discussion a little bit earlier in the week. My point is actually that one has to invest in the training of that staff. And if you do it, it's easy to train them. It's easy to overcome the obstacles. But again, it's linked to a surprise. Too many organizations, when they do implement it, and I said that in my presentation as well, is that, surprise, here's a new sortation system. Surprise, we are now going to come stock with drones. Surprise. And we are actually not preparing people for the changes that they have to go through. Once you get them on board, it's easy. Again, the same thing with the execs. That's why I said they're there for two parts of the project. Starting, choosing a name, and then when we hand out teachers t-shirts, and in between we don't see them. So it's very important that we do get them on board, and that once they have decided how to implement any kind of automation, that they stay on board. I worked in a facility a long time ago where the warehouse manager used to shout the word Geronimo. I hope he's not on this specific webinar. And that is when they flipped the switch in that facility to switch off the automation and to switch off the automatic locating of stock, because they felt the warehouse was now too full and they could no longer rely on the system. So he would shout out Geronimo, and everyone would just put down their scanners and start putting stock away wherever they wanted. And that's very important, is to work with people to overcome those resistances and fears, and to let them start seeing the benefits of what this will bring and how to take them on a journey for this. If you think about, there's a term called the Luddites, and that's related, if I think correctly, back to the 1800s, of the revolt that the textile workers in the UK came into and started damaging machines when it was putting in. And it's known now to be a fear of technology, or not wanting to implement technology. And people nowadays, senior managers in organizations, often wear that Luddite badge with a quite proud cap on their heads. And they don't want to change because they don't like the change. It's not that they don't understand it, but that's the case where I don't like it, so I'm not going to do it, and therefore you will not have my full support. So get the right training for the right people, and you'll get them on board. Surprise them with a bad surprise, and they will be very negative for a long time. It's like the surprise that we got last week with Omicron. Not sure how to pronounce it. Surprise, you are not going to the UK anymore. Surprise, 70% cancellations in the Western Cape. That's not the kind of surprises that we want. Educate and prepare people for the changes that they need.
Excellent. Luke, can you please touch on your experiences with respect to automation and our unstable power grid? When looking at the return on investment, I'm presuming that needs to be factored into the equation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So we do very strange things in South Africa to solve the problem. We put in some sort of power fluctuation stuff, and it's not cheap. We're just one of the sponsors will talk about it today. We had a long meeting about spending about 500,000 on smoothing it, because if the power is fluctuating, you blow all your lovely electronic stuff. So you've got to put in uninterrupted power supplies. You've got to put in power smoothing of various types. So any high level of automation comes with lots of power things. So generator, sure, but the problem is every time the generator starts up, you get a massive spike. When it switches off, you get a spike. When Eskom switches on, you get a spike. So lots of money spent on stuff to take that out, and that's really money spent well spent. And we're spending more and more on it every day because there doesn't seem to be a light at the end of this Eskom tunnel. If it is, it's a train coming at us.
And with the petrol price at the moment, it's becoming impossible to run generators. I ran an error earlier this morning and ran into someone who said they went to their local postnet, and the postnet was saying that they are spending now 1,000 Rand a day on fuel for their generators. Specifically in the area of Bedfordview, they've been without power for the last week due to sabotage of a cable. And this is the environment that we work in. A few months ago, we commissioned clean air systems in a medical devices facility. And on day 2, they commissioned on day 1, tested on day 2, power surges blew for all 4 units at a great cost. So you have to factor that, I think, in South Africa into that, which is not probably a problem as big in the rest of the world.
But it's not difficult. Easy to do, just spend money.
If you've got it to spend.
You've got to make some first, Martin.
No, if you want to put in automation, you got to put in power management. End of discussion.
John has a further question. At 35 Rand an hour, a typical warehouse worker, I would think it's very difficult to make a case that extensive automation would be financially viable. I would assume that a workforce in an environment with 40% unemployment would be highly driven and high performing, given the consequences of loss of employment and an inability to be rehired easily, quickly by someone else. I like that, John.
Yeah, that's a nice academic view of life. Couple of comments. Firstly, sometimes you just can't do it with more people. If your volume, let me give you an example, a typical courier. If his volumes pop up beyond, say, 3,000 an hour, he just can't do it. Just can't be done. So you have to automate or decentralize. Go and build 10 different courier facilities around the country or around Gauteng, and then your costs go through the roof because a courier facility wants to be hub and spoke and centralized. So there are some businesses that just can't work without automation. Are people highly motivated? Gee, sometimes companies get them. I've seen places where staff are just unbelievably motivated, but I've seen other places where the staff do nothing all day, sitting in a corner, sleeping or doing whatever they do. So I think motivating staff is a whole new presentation, and I don't think we've got time to talk about it today. But it's not always true. Quite interesting. When we were doing work at Walmart, they were saying that permanent staff are far more motivated than temporary staff in the States. I think we've got exactly the opposite in South Africa. That temporary staff are often, and I don't think you can always say it's like this, like that. And not all, some people are highly motivated, but gee, to say all of them are motivated would be also.
Do you have anything to add on that, Archie?
Yeah, I think from a staff motivation point of view, do you come to work motivated every day? I don't think everybody comes to work motivated every day, but if you can come to work and it's about 70% of the time you're highly motivated to come to work, that's pretty much as good as it's going to get. The other side of the coin is how motivated can you be if your job is to offload boxes off a truck for 8 hours a day? I think those are very difficult, and you could actually just duck the question and say, well, that's the job you signed up for. Yes, I understand that, but as the manager, or as the, surely there must be an easier way, a better way, and it doesn't always have to cost money. You have to apply your mind and how do you make this better? Because if you're not doing it together, you're not doing it at all. So yeah, I just have a very different view on these type of things.
I think the plight of the warehouse worker is very misunderstood by the majority of managers and other people in our businesses. I did a project last year in May, just after we went, they lifted the lockdown levels a little bit. at a warehouse in Centurion, technology type warehouse, MRO materials. And one of the things that I did was to follow a warehouse worker around all day long picking. We were looking at productivities. And I spent 2 days with a guy. On day one, we walked 13 kilometers in the warehouse. How do I know that? I've switched on my Garmin tracker. And when I spoke to the guy in more detail, he had gotten up at 3 o'clock in that morning. He was living in Chochambouwe. He had to catch his first taxi by 4:45 in the morning, travel for approximately 2 hours with different kinds of public transport. Then the taxi then dropped him a further 2 kilometers away from where the actual DC was, had to walk into the DC, walk 13 kilometers through the day to do the pick that he needed to do, and then repeat that process, same again, to get home approximately 9 o'clock in the evening. So they knocked off at 5 o'clock and then walk for 2 kilometers, catch the next taxi, buses and trains and so on. And we don't always understand what our workers go through and why they behave in a specific way, because we are too far removed from what's actually going on. When you give that guy then in his warehouse a ride on pallet truck, a power pallet truck, instead of pushing a trolley, it will make a huge difference to his life and also to the productivity in the warehouse. So we have to look at that. How do we invest in automation, even if it's just a little bit of automation, to make the lives of our warehouse workers better?
Absolutely. We have two more questions, one comment. Sorry, Archie, I interrupted you.
No, I was just agreeing with Carl.
Yeah, and I also just agreeing. Great.
Claudel, any tips on the induction of new staff in the business, as the import of automation or technology will only be successful if input is correct?
I think this is Karen's field, but let me just say, I was lecturing the other day at the BCom logistics course on their honors class, and I was chatting to the lecturer, and she said to me that 30% of that class are going to get jobs. These are guys with a degree, honors degree in supply chain, and 30% get jobs. So inducting new people, one of the first things is cheap. There's a lot of people out there who are well qualified and are bright and capable. And for them to have got in that course and got to their 4th year, they must be very bright and very capable. So, hey, it's also important to say who you employ, not just inducting them. But Karen, I think this is your baby.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, this is a difficult one because I think the gap in South Africa between tertiary education and getting into your first job and understanding what real world is like is still very big. And I don't think we are doing enough in our varsities to prepare the guys for their actual jobs. So maybe at the varsity side, like you have life orientation at school, that's more about sex education than how to rent your first apartment. We need to get these kinds of skills ready and right, and then give the people opportunity to work into different departments, even if your job is something very specific. If you are starting at SAB, for example, I know they put the guys on the trucks for the first 2 weeks. Get the guys in your businesses where the boxes are moving, where the heart of the operation is, even if it is going to be the accountant in the business, that they can understand the full spectrum of the business. And that's also one of the things that we find with automation projects or systems implementations, is that we focus on training everyone to understand the full system, from inbound to inventory to outbound, and to understand the importance of your role in that bigger picture. Because otherwise you become like a guy that's working in the mines. All that he's doing is blasting or working with a pick and a spade all day long, but he doesn't know that he's actually mining for gold and how that will be used later on. So context, when you get back to how adults learn, why must I know this? And you have to give that context. You have to link it to the past and you have to link it to the future. And then when people find their way and find where they fit in, then how the business works becomes more important for them and they can relate more to what's going on. I hope that answers your question, Claudel.
Last one, Claire.
So Piwo, why and what resistance do we get from the executives? Martin, this is directed at you.
Yeah, no, sometimes none. Sometimes they just want to automate everything. And sometimes hey, you know, exactly what we've talked about. Yeah, lots of unemployment, we can't afford to do it. And it often depends on which time of the year. Is it the time when they can't cope? Is it immediately after a strike? Hey, if you're going to sell automation, best time after a big strike. So I don't know if you have a lot of resistance. The resistance comes in when you tell them how much it's going to cost. Then they say, what? That can't be. You know, even if there's payback, you know, there's not a lot of, when I talk hard automation, I'm not talking about putting in a pallet truck instead of a hand pallet truck. But if you're putting in hard automation, it can often be hundreds of millions, never mind tens of millions. So, you know, and that's normally the big shock. Then they get over it and they look at what's going to happen to the business. And then they've got decisions to make. Hey, do we automate? Do we decentralize? Do we centralize? And generally, a guy wants to automate because his business is growing so fast, he has no option. He has to do something. And it's very seldom, hey, I don't want to grow my business. It's always about, hey, I want to grow my business. I want to, and to do that, I've either got to move site to a bigger facility, or hey, I can put automation in here and stay where I am for another 10 years. Because don't forget about the fact that automation massively reduces footprint. Usually, not always, sometimes won't, but usually you can, I mean, if you store in a high bay warehouse, we've done one 40 meters high. That's a very different environment to, you know, a normal stack warehouse. So there's no simple answer to that. But generally we don't get that much until, as I say, until we tell them how much it's going to cost.
Until you give them the bill.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that what we see when we do our change management projects? So when we prepare workers for change, especially when it's a big change or a big system, we can take anywhere from about 8 to 12 weeks to work with them on a weekly basis to prepare them for the change. And we find that, again, the middle and the senior management believe that they are open to change. So they don't want to participate in the change activities because, again, like we said, they are too busy with various things. They have to attend a strategy or HR or a budget meeting. And they believe that they are open to change. And what we then find is after 12 weeks of working with our operational level staff, who's now all ready to embrace the new system or the new automation or the new technology that's in there, they're all ready. But the middle and the executive management still hanker for the past and want to do things the way they used to. And that is what we struggle with, is that the middle and senior management believe they are ready for change and they don't have any resistances, so they don't have to attend any kind of change activation training. And that's what we struggle with a lot of organizations. They believe they are okay, instead of seeing that there is an opportunity for growth for them as well.
Yeah. Great. Dries has a comment. I disagree. My past 4 implementations have done. Even staff with smartphones needed lots of training, as it's a total different language and a different process.
Yeah,
so
we find that because I think one of the wrong things that's happening in South Africa at the moment is that we are trying to force people from 11 different home languages, actually even more if we count the unofficial ones as well, to be educated in English. And especially in the workplace, it's like a child at school. The most English they talk, if they're not a first language English speaker, is yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, sorry, ma'am. And the moment they sit next to their friend again, they revert back to whatever their mother language is. And we see that in organizations as well. Although in South Africa, most organizations, the language of choice or the business language is indeed English, operational workers don't talk English to each other. The moment they go around the corner, they speak whatever their home language is. And when we now give them a new warehouse management system, for example, or new automation, I remember a project that we did with Interroll many, many years ago. A lot of the instructions were in Dutch. We struggled a lot for translation and so on, because people are not used to technical discussions in English. And that we find can sometimes be a barrier to entry when we do training with staff.
So clear comment on that. It depends on the type of automation. If you're putting in a new warehouse management system, 100%. But if you're putting in hard automation, there's actually very little for people to do. They don't have to look at fancy screens. They don't have to do anything, quite honestly. They have to just make sure all the nuts and bolts are kept in place, and they don't push the automatic emergency stop button. That's about all they have to do.
That's the man and the dog again, Martin.
So hard automation, the training is actually very, very simple. The machines do the process. Soft automation, you want to put in a new warehouse management system. Ooh, that's a matter of education second to none. That's all about being able to read screens, do things. And as much as the education is about doing things right, it's about, hey, don't do these things wrong. Don't push this button when something doesn't happen, because it's going to cause a massive disaster. And so it depends on the type of automation. And actually, the higher the level of automation, the easier it is to train people, if that makes sense. It's that soft automation that is really needs extensive testing, training, and testing some more and training some more. But the hard automation, not so much.
To add some anecdotal evidence to that one, in one of our recent projects was a warehouse management system project. The company chose not to replace the scanners. The scanners were a little bit old, but they were still working, and the new system could actually function with the old scanners as well. On the old scanners, there was a button called the function button that you used on the old system for basically everything. It functioned like an enter button. On the new system, if you press that function button, it would be basically like dividing by 0. All kinds of bats out of all kinds of hell would come down upon you. And we had to struggle a lot with people to find how will we overcome and prevent them from using the function button, because we couldn't switch it off. We couldn't take it off the machine. It would still be there. So we came up with a very fancy funeral for the function button that everyone then attended, and we buried the function button. So sometimes you have to be very clever with how you educate and train people for different kinds of systems implementations and different kinds of automation. But the man and the dog, I think it's quite important. I had a big conversation with my son, who's 14 years old, about the man and the dog, because I wanted him to do a stop motion animation video for me about that. And he said to me, but actually you don't need the dog. And then he said, but actually in that case, you also don't need the man. So I'm not going to do this, Mom. You don't need either of those two in the kind of new factories. It's a waste of time to have both of them. And certainly if you have one, you don't need the other.
Archie, some last words from you?
Martin, you know, listening to this and that, this whole thing is about people. It's not about automation. It's about people and how you use the automation to get to your end goal. I think that's the key.
Magic.
Yeah.
Great.
And we've still got lots of people here, so they must have been semi-interested. One day, anybody who's got any comments, either drop me an email or drop SAPEX a mail or send us some comments, please. Anything you'd like to hear for in the future, let us know as well, what we can run seminars on, and maybe at the SAPEX conference. Have you advertised your SAPEX conference?
We have. I haven't done it this afternoon, but I was about to do it, actually. So do you want to do it for me?
No, that's your baby.
I just wanted to thank, Archie, if you're looking for someone, Jenny's applying for a job. I think she just wants.
I'll be in touch.
Does Jenny want to be the man or the dog?
Yeah, Jen, or do you want free airtime? Just tell us. Both. Oh, okay.
The tyranny of the all.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much for your engagement. And before I thank the speakers, I'd like to just thank the sponsors again for supporting SAPEX always, Interroll, Roca Matrix, and RAM. And I want to just thank our three brilliant speakers, Martin, Karen, and Archie, for your time, your constant support of SAPIX for the supply chain space in South Africa, your cleverness, and for engaging with us all this afternoon. You will receive the presentation and you'll be able to access those links. But if you have any questions, having looked at the presentation again, please reach out to me and I will direct your questions to the speakers. And before we close, because I've still got 51 people on the call, I just wanted to remind you all that the 44th annual conference of SAPIX, the leading event in Africa for supply chain professionals, will be in Cape Town, 12th to the 15th of June next year. So you can take a long weekend, stay in Cape Town, go and visit the wine farms if you're not from Cape Town. And the call for speakers has gone out. We have already received lots of amazing stories and submissions. So if it's something that you would like to develop your own personal brand and showcase your organization's stories, please answer the call for speakers. And if you have any questions on the conference, sponsorship packages, and exhibition booths, give me a call too. Excellent. I think that's all for now. I don't see any other hands raised, so I think we'll close off now. And thank you all again for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Archie. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks.
Thank you, Claire, for putting it together.
Cheers.
Pleasure. Thank you to Cindy and Caden and Gugu for the background as well, liaising with everybody.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye now.
Thanks.
Happy
Bye.
evening.
Bye. Bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.